Yo, what's up? Um, for everyone coming in, we're just gonna throw together a design, and I don't really have anything planned, so I'm just kind of making it up as I go, and hopefully something pretty cool will come out of it. So what I'm currently doing right now is I'm just making a circle, and I'm making dividers in the circle so I can break the circle up into a bunch of different little shapes and then use those shapes. So, alright. That looked a little bit, it looked like there's a little bit too much space up there and down there, even though they should be equal. But I'm just going to adjust it just to make it look a little bit better in my opinion. Alright. Let's try this now. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. So now, let's see. And again, just making this up as I go. But I think a triangle would be cool, maybe behind it. Um, so when I'm designing with really random colors, and it doesn't really matter because I'm going to go back and fix the colors later. I'm just concerned about giving what I'm working with different colors that I can differentiate. So like it doesn't matter what color the triangle is or what color the circle is. I'm just looking for stuff that I can quickly, when I look at my screen, see the difference in the shapes just because of the different colors. This looks kind of cool. Um, um, not loving these triangles. Let's go back to let's go back to one of these two. I'm not sure which one I'm liking better right now. We'll save a copy of each. That way we can come back and visit. So there's a couple different things. We could invert this, which could look kind of cool. So right now I'm just playing around with the stroke, and I'm gonna move the stroke to the inside so we can still see the gaps like that. Okay. And as soon as I'm doing it, I'm not loving it too much. So let's see. Let's play around with putting some patterns inside of each of these. So I'm just ungrouping it so each one's its own separate thing, and then I'm just gonna give them all a different color so I can easily differentiate between all of them. Okay, so now let's bring some patterns in, and let's see what it looks like putting a pattern over each of those, because I think that could give it a pretty cool effect. So right now I'm just grabbing the patterns that I have saved. Okay. So we're just going to image trace this because it would be crazy to go over it with the pen tool, and we can get it pretty dang close with the image trace. I'm going to have to play around with a couple settings to get it close, but we can get it relatively close. Okay, that's getting pretty close there. Let's maybe bring the threshold up a little bit. And the threshold is like what's counted as black. Like when you have gray pixels, it's what will be black. So when I bring the threshold up, more and more gray pixels will be counted as black. Okay, that looks good to me. Okay, so the cool thing about this now is that we have kind of two different patterns to play with. So what that means is we have the white pattern to play with as well as the black pattern. So there's the white pattern and here's the black pattern. And I kind of think I want to use the white one for this because it'll fill in more space. So let's go ahead and bring that over and let's see what it's going to look like. I kind of like the size it's at. I don't think I need to resize it at all. But let's see. Let's bring this over. So I think that's actually a pretty decent place to put it in. Maybe we can move it a little bit. But the thing to keep in mind is what's white will be taken away from the black. So I don't want too much white over the black, or over the red, excuse me, not black, because then it's going to just disappear. So let's try this out. Boom, there we go. I think that looks pretty cool. I'm a fan of that one. So let's move that back over to here. And then let's get rid of that. Cool. So now we have one pattern in. So we're just going to repeat the process all the way down the line for the rest of them, I think will be a cool way to go about it. So again, right now I'm just grabbing another pattern and just going to do the same thing. I'm going to drop that new pattern on over into Illustrator. I'm going to image trace it, which is a pretty powerful tool. This one doesn't need too much tweaking in my opinion, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. And again, we're going to basically get two patterns out of this pattern. We're going to get the white pattern as well as the black pattern. So here's our white pattern. And here's the black pattern. And so again, I'm thinking which pattern is they're gonna knock their pattern out of the shape. And so I think if we do this, we will get left with the most amount of our other shape. So it probably makes more sense to me to do this one. That way we have more of the shape to actually look at. So let's bring our shape on over. Let's find, and we're just trying to find a place where we think the knocked out pattern would look good. And honestly, it's a cool pattern. It's going to be kind of tough to find a piece of it that doesn't necessarily look that good, but let's just try right there because I think that's cool. And boom, there we go. So just going to bring it back over here. line it all up with the alignment tools, and there we go. So, and you know what, I'll make all the patterns that I've done the same color, so it's a way to keep track of them. So we'll just keep on going down the line, just keep on rolling. Alright, boom, on to the next pattern. So this one's a little blurry. We're going to need to play with it a lot more in image trace to get it to look nice. But that's okay, because we can do it. So yeah, you can see it looks a little chunky. We're going to need to tweak it a lot more to get it looking nice. But it can be done, so we're going to do it. So there's two things I'm going for right here. I want the leaves to look a little more organic, a less like choppy. And then there's like tiny little white flecks that I kind of want to get out. And basically just when you play around with the image trace options for long enough, you kind of understand what will do what, so you'll kind of intuitively know how to get the image to look how you want it to. But the threshold is kind of how much the black, how many gray pixels will become black. So basically how large the area of black becomes. Paths is just how many little anchor points are going to make up your paths. Corners are how rounded those anchor points are. And then noise is when they go in and trace it for you. A lot of times they'll kind of add noise to try and take out jaggedness or stuff like that. So you can basically tell it to ignore more or less of that. So looking at it right now, there's a couple little more flecks, but it's basically getting to where I'd like it. Maybe right about there. Yeah, that looks good. So we're gonna expand it out. We're gonna make our two patterns again. And I'm just selecting a piece of white and going to select all the white pieces, and that's how I can pick. This is how I can pick my white pattern out of my black. And then I'm just also grouping it so I have two patterns. The Pathfinder tools are super powerful. So they're not intuitive, but they're very powerful. The shapes on the side are kind of not helpful for what they actually do. It's just kind of something you're gonna have to learn. But I would definitely say I don't really make any design that doesn't have a decent amount of the Pathfinder tool used in it. Okay, so I almost think this pattern is maybe a little bit too big compared to, well, let's just bring it over and see. But I think we might have to shrink the pattern down a little bit to make it look nice. But maybe I'm wrong though. That actually looks kind of cool. Let's just try that out because that actually kind of looks cool even though I was thinking it should have been smaller. That's not bad. That's kind of a cool looking little pattern. Yeah, I guess that's pretty cool. We'll stick with that for now. Okay, so two more patterns left, but it's looking pretty cool so far, I think. So this is a little bit repetitive, but we're getting a pretty cool result out of it. And, you know, the cool thing about not really having an idea in mind, or about having an idea in mind, is that you can just tweak it and play around with it so much in Illustrator that it's just fun to have that amount of kind of room to play around. You know, it's not a pen, so it's not like once you do something that you're just married to that. You know, you have so much room to move around and play around. So I think that's cool and will benefit us once we kind of get to the finalizing stages of this design. So this pattern's a little bit tougher to work with just because it's so clearly a pattern, and I'm not sure if it's going to look better being, you know, symmetrical or kind of off symmetrical, but I think let's try right there. That looks good to my eye. No, let's move it a little bit. I'm not. It's tough to say should it be symmetrical or should it be not symmetrical. Let's try this one. See, I don't like this one as much because the corner's cut off right there and right there. Let's try and get it right around. Let's just try symmetrical, actually. That might be our best bet. Let's just try right around there. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay. Almost done. Last pattern. And then we'll have a pretty cool little circle filled together here. And let's see. For this one, we will go... Alright. Let's go with this pattern. And just get all those tabs you don't need out of there. Clean up the workspace a little bit. Okay. So this one, similar to that other pattern we used, a little bit blurry, so it's going to take a little bit more cleanup in the Pathfinder to get it where we want it. But it's not too bad right there, actually. I think if we bring the noise down and possibly the threshold down a little bit, we'll get pretty close to where we want it. Yeah, that's pretty good to me. I see some areas around in there where we can get a cool pattern out of. So we'll expand it out, ungroup it. Let's break it up into the two different patterns. And one thing you're probably noticing a lot is that I pretty heavily work outside of the artboard, which is cool. There's no real reason you're constrained to just working inside this white box. So I tend to like to work a lot outside of it just because of my workflow style. Okay, that's cool right there. Let's try that one out. Let's see, we can move it to a little bit better place than that. Let's try right around in here. That's cool looking. Yeah, actually that might be a little too close to that one. Let's try, I like getting these kind of little things in here. So let's try and get maybe that in there. That looks cool, I think. Yeah, let's try that out. Okay, that one's pretty cool. Alright. Cool, so now we have a pretty good basic design going on here. I think we can sort of start to play around with finalizing it now. Not that it's necessarily close to being finalized, but we can start playing around with different colors and kind of what would bring the whole thing together to make it the best. So I'm just going to drop a black background on because I envision it being on a black shirt, um, assuming this is a shirt graphic. So now let's get rid of this triangle for a second and just, so here's what we have without the triangle, which is honestly awesome by itself. And maybe let's play around with a version without the triangle as well as a version with the triangle, just to see what we're gonna get doing that. So I'm just gonna copy my artboard over, and then we're gonna have two versions to play with, one without the triangle, one with the triangle. And let's just bring in our color scheme that we need. Let's drag that over here so it'll be placed in our color palette right there, which is going to be beneficial to us. Okay, so let's just play. First, let's just start by making this like the official color that we need. And let's do the same with this as well. Let's play around with, we can play around with that being red and this being white, which that's cool. Both are cool in their own respective ways right now. But because I don't have anything in mind, I'm just going to keep playing around with a bunch of different stuff and seeing what I get to, essentially. That's also cool in its own way. You know, I feel like we might end up with let's just make a bunch of artboards, because I feel like I'm just going to want to play around with a bunch of different looking stuff. But if you guys have any ideas, you can throw them out. Okay, so let's leave this one like that. Let's leave this one like this. Okay, and then, yeah, we could do something like that. That's pretty cool as well. Definitely a lot of options. That's kind of the fun thing about this one. Would it be interesting if we flip some of these pieces around? And it may not be, so. That's interesting, and it honestly could be a design that would do somewhat well, but I don't love it as much as I like this one up here more, and I think I like it as a circle like that more as well. So I'm gonna take that one back, I think. We could play around, let's play around with that triangle, that second little triangle we had going on earlier. Or actually, now that I'm seeing this, that one's not as cool, but let's try. So the big thing when you're designing shirt graphics that you have to think about is anyone who's going to look at this in a store, like a Hot Topic or something, they're going to see a 16.5 by 20.5 inches sort of artboard. That's what they're going to see, because that's kind of the printing area of a shirt. So that's the one thing to keep in mind, is this is kind of the artboard of the shirt. So you don't want to do a design that's necessarily going to be unflattering to this shape. So the good shapes to keep in mind are a circle is a good one, a triangle with the flat part on top is another very flattering shape, and then obviously like a tall rectangle as it is. So a lot of my designs, kind of no matter what the shape is, I try in some way to kind of add embellishments to it that will make it one of those shapes. But honestly, this one right here is definitely standing out to me the most. So it might be fun to just go with that one. let me try one last idea, but I think that one might be our winner. So again, I mean, originally I was thinking this triangle behind the circle, and then here we are at the end, and maybe that isn't my favorite anymore. So it's kind of fun to be able to play around and not necessarily have to be stuck to your original idea to kind of go out and get other ideas. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this idea is maybe make a negative space version of the pattern, a negative space version of the pattern inside this circle. So let's cut that out, and that's something pretty cool to work with as well. Okay, yes, that one's pretty cool as well. It's a little weird looking, but it does have some cool things about it. Let's try one last thing, and then if this last thing isn't doing it, then we'll continue on with that design, because we still have to bring it on over into Photoshop and kind of texture it and make it print ready essentially. So that was my last idea, is kind of that white circle around it, which looks okay as well. Maybe let's try this with that one. No, still thinking that one's the one to go with. So I'm gonna save this triangle one over here, but I think let's move forward with this one. So, ooh, that gave me a cool idea. Actually, this gives me a cool idea as well. Let's play around with a couple things, but the one cool idea is we could put a band name right in the center right there. That would be cool. And the other one was, it would be cool to have this pattern. And again, we don't want to stretch the pattern, so we'll go back and remake it longer. But it could be cool to have it like that. Could be cool to have it like that, and then it could be cool to tilt it. That's kind of cool. Both of those are. That's a pretty cool one. Maybe not a great shape for a shirt, but it is cool. Let's keep that in mind, I think. Okay, so now we have this logo pack over here of all the logos we can play around with, kind of dragging and dropping them in. Which is cool, so we don't have to worry about remaking them every time. They're already set out here for us. So let's just start with the name, obviously, because that's going to want to be on the shirt. So typically like to put the name up at the top. First thing you read, but it can also be in the middle, or it could also be at the bottom. But I just tend to like the top. And most of the time when I'm putting the band's logo on, I'm kind of trying to match it to the design, but 21 Pilots is very kind of married to this branding. They're not putting out a lot of stuff that kind of goes outside their little logo mark, so it makes more sense to just keep it than to try and worry about finding a font that kind of fits the feel of this design. And I was trying to make it about as wide as that, but it also kind of looks good being small. So here it is small, and I kind of like it small as well. Small might not be as good for a t-shirt though. Keep in mind this is, the front of a t-shirt, so. Okay. So, honestly, what could be done from here is we could just drop down blurry face, and then you would basically have a done shirt right here if we wanted that. So if you look at like this would be your shirt, is just this right here, which works well as a shirt, I think. You know, it's bold, got the band name big. It's gonna be, people are gonna be attracted to that. But for the sake of this, I think let's go, we could add some stuff in this negative space. There's negative space right here. Even a little bit of negative space in here. We can definitely play around with it more. And 21 Pilots with their branding tend, you know, they have a bunch of branding going on, and they tend to like to put a lot of it in there. So let's continue bringing stuff on in and sort of flesh this out more and get it to be more of a solid rectangle and leave kind of less negative space around in these corners. So again, I'm just gonna start dropping in little branding elements around, and then from there start shaping it more and more together and seeing what shape works better with what, and then in the end hopefully have something nice looking. So I think these two little shapes, this little skeleton and alien, are pretty fun to play around with because they're such an interesting little shape. And they're gonna fit pretty nicely in that negative space right there. They're gonna fill it out pretty well. And the thing I'm noticing currently as I'm doing this is that maybe even though our shirt can be 20.5 inches tall, it doesn't necessarily need to be. We can kind of maybe condense a lot of these elements down a bit. But also maybe not, you know, it might look better spread out. We don't really know. So let's just keep playing around. Yeah, like I said before, the beauty of Illustrator is we are not stuck with what we do. We can just keep playing around with it for as long as we want. But as I'm doing this, you know, this does kind of look a little bit better in my eyes, condensing it down. So you can even see, you know, look, we're starting, let's move this out of the way, but look, we're starting to get that nice box shape that'll look pretty nice on a shirt. So, and you know what? This shape is, it's a rectangle, so when we put it in, it fits in this negative space, but it still leaves a little bit of negative space right there. That's kind of weird. And I think, let's keep it there for a second, but we might be able to find some of their other shapes that'll fill in better. Let's bring in their logo, because we haven't even used their logo yet in this design. And one thing, it probably won't look good, but I just want to try it anyways, is what if we brought the logo over this? And the thing I'm thinking why this won't look good is just because there's so much going on with the pattern. Yeah, see, it's pretty hard to see. So it doesn't look great. But what could look cool, and I keep saying this because, again, this is just all tweaking. It could look cool to do that. It almost makes it a completely different design. But a cool design. But I kind of like what we had before earlier. I think that was a little bit more different. I think looking at this is a little bit more unique of a design. So let's play around with this more. Okay. So this is cool. It's very cool. Just something about it just doesn't quite draw me in the way I want to be drawn in by a shirt design. This could work right over the top center, which is kind of an unconventional place for a shirt design to stick something, but let's just try it out because it might look cool for this. It is cool. Let's try it down as well. Let's try it down here. That might look even cooler. And by putting it down here, we're kind of sticking to that inverse triangle shape I talked about. Obviously it's more of a rectangle than the inverse triangle, but just the fact that it's heavier on top than it is on the bottom, that's a good rule to stick to. You kind of want it to be heavier on top than it is on the bottom. It's a little bit more flattering of a shape. Yeah, see, and making that blurry face word mark smaller helps a lot with that. It kind of helps more with that bringing it down sort of shape. But it's not bad at all. There's a lot, yeah, there are a lot of symbols going on. And the new designs that the band has been running with are very set in their sort of branding. I mean, I think the whole idea is, if I would say, look, here's a cool design right here, but I think the point of adding all this other stuff is you make a shirt that, from 50 feet away, you can tell it's a 21 Pilots shirt pretty easily. So that's kind of, they're not necessarily bad designs, and I mean they just, I think a lot of people don't like them because they think they're too much, but they definitely do what they set out to do. But yeah, after I just said that they're fine with all their branding, I'm actually gonna take some out and probably just maybe leave it just like I really want to get this skeleton and alien in. I just don't know exactly where. Okay, let's try them down here. And this will probably actually work out pretty nicely, I think. Okay, let's try this. So I think I like this the most right now. And then we're gonna add some texture to it in Photoshop, but I think this is probably a good, the last thing I want to try just to see how it works out is what if we put these just right in the middle. Yeah, that's cool, I think. Cool like that. Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I think this is a good final design right here. Yeah, okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to hop on over into Photoshop. So with Photoshop, I'm going to set up a document that's going to be shirt sized. So let's go to 16.5 inches by 20.5 inches. We're going to set the 300 pixels per inch. For printing, 72 pixels per inch is fine. It's going to look fine, but I like to design at 300 a little bit better. So here's our shirt, and we're just going to go ahead. Let's drop this in. So now we're just going to play around with texture. And the thing, too, with 21 Pilot's new branding is they don't use a whole lot of texturing. I think that I think that some of their designs have branding or have texture and some don't. But we'll do a little bit of texturing on this one. Not too heavy though. We probably won't use my full texturing process on this just because it's so heavy. But what I want to start off with is just breaking the colors out. You know, actually, what I would normally do is just lasso it, but for the sake of this, it'll be a lot easier to just do a box right there. And this will be the easiest way to just break all of our colors out. So the reason we're breaking the colors up is because this is essentially going to be screen printed, and that means that you're going to have two screens, one for the color white and one for the color red. So what we want to do is we want to, you know, make it essentially, here's one of our screens that we're printing, here's the other screen that we're printing. So when we texture it, we could texture it all together first and then color separate it. I like to texture it already color separated. Just makes it easier for me. So what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to add a slight blur to this. And what this is essentially going to do in the end is it's going to round stuff off, kind of these very sharp corners you have. It's going to make them a little bit more round, which is going to make them a lot more organic looking when it gets screen printed. It's going to make it a little better. So I'm just looking, I don't want a heavy blur. Like, I don't want anything like that. I just want a nice light little blur, probably around 8, maybe more like 10, which will round off our corners when this whole process is done. And the other thing too that I'm looking for when I blur it is I don't want to lose a lot of detail. I don't want pieces like merging into each other or a bunch of tiny little pieces getting cut out. So we're going to do that. That's a good amount of blur. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to take this roller paintbrush, which I would recommend making your own brush if you want to go online and find your own. That's totally cool too. So we're going to go ahead and just give a nice little texture over the entire thing. I'm trying to keep it light, trying to keep it like this. Planning on using a 110 mesh screen for that white. I am not the one screen printing it. It would be sent off to a printer, so couldn't really tell you what the mesh count's going to be for the screen. So now we're going to reveal this texture, and that way we can kind of paint back in a little bit more of what we had. Sorry. Okay, so now that we have our texture here. And I forgot to say that you want to put your texture on the new layer above. So Now when we go in and we reveal our texture and we can paint part of it back in. So for this, I would say leave a little bit of texturing, not a lot, because this is only going to texture the edges. It's not going to texture too much the inside. So we're going to blur this one out again, and I'm going to paint a little bit more back in right there, because that's a little heavy in there. And this is all just an eyeball thing. You don't really, there's no right and wrong way to texture it. So we're going to go ahead and blur that texture that we just put on, then we're going to merge all of it together. So here's kind of where the fun part happens. We're going to go up to our image adjustments, brightness, contrast, and in legacy mode, we're going to bump the contrast up all the way, and then we're going to pull the brightness down until we're kind of at a place where we like it. And I like it right around there, I think. And what you'll see now is if you look closely, we kind of made these letters look more organic looking. Look at that Y down there. Same with blurry face. So you're just getting this more kind of vintage punk rock feel to it, which is pretty cool. But one step further, now I want to texture kind of the inside of everything we have. So I'm just going to select the color, and I'm going to select similar, which is select everything white. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to contract it by about 10 to 15 pixels, but I think 10 for this. So what it does is now when we go ahead and put this texture on, it's not going to get the edges, which is cool because A, we just textured the edges, but B, when screen printing wears off, a lot of times it wears off from the inside out. So this will kind of give it this old distressed shirt feel, which I like. So again, we're just going to kind of paint the texture over it. Just paint around randomly. It doesn't matter how filled in it is. It's, again, all just a personal preference. And I forgot to do it on the above layers, so there we go, right there. And now we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to reveal it all, and then we're going to kind of paint it back in a little bit. So we just have a little bit of texture. And I think especially in these letters, we'll kind of get some really cool little shapes going on. So let's go ahead and again, let's merge it all. And we're going to use this same brightness contrast thing going on. And boom, there you go. There's a little bit of worn out texture going on there, which is cool. But it's kind of gritty looking, and I want it to be a little bit more fitting in. So what I'm going to go is I'm going to add some dust and scratches, which is, if we bring this up to maybe like, let's say 2, let's try 3, but I think 2 is going to look a little bit better. Actually, 3 looks fine. So when I hit OK, you'll notice that it takes a lot of that little grit out in there and makes it, here's what it was before, here's after the, here's before the dust and scratches, and then with the dust and scratches, we go to that. There you go. So there is kind of a more organic looking texture for that. But now the thing is, we still have one more color to do, which is red. And typically on a shirt, when you're sending it off to a printer, you're not going to have any more than 3 colors. So we're pretty set on having 2 colors. Is my printer using an old water-based color? See, again, I'm not the one printing it. This is going to get sent off to a screen printing company. They're going to print it, so it's not my printer. But yeah, it's trying to replicate basically an old vintage shirt that, by wearing out from the inside out. This isn't trying to be like some crisp new thing. We're kind of thinking like 90s, like vintage punk rock to the way that this wears out. If you were to look at like an old t-shirt, that's kind of how the screen print should wear on it. Okay, so again, for the process that I'm doing, it needs to be in white. We'll go back and we'll change it to red when we're done with the whole process. So again, just going to do the exact same process I just did for the white color. So blur it. Let's add some texture over it. Let's bring that texture back in. And because this is going to be on the outside, we want not a super heavy texture. Let's go ahead and let's blur that. And then let's merge all of that. Let's go ahead and bring the brightness contrast back up. In legacy mode, there you go, we got a nice little wear and tear on the edges. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna select the color. We're gonna contract it. We're gonna go ahead and paint another texture over that. And this one will just be on the insides of it to replicate that old vintage kind of wear to it. Then we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna paint that back in. We don't want a super heavy texture, although you could have a super heavy texture. That's completely up to you, and there's definitely been shirts I've sent off to clients with a real heavy texture that's been a pretty cool look to it, honestly. So it's up to you and also kind of up to your client. Okay, then at the very end here, we're gonna give this brightness contrast, and I'm just right now looking for what's going to be a nice looking texture, and I think right around there looks nice. And then the last thing we're going to do is just bring in that dust and scratches to make those little flecks a little bit larger, a little bit, see right in there, a little bit more organic looking. So now we have two layers. We have this layer and we have this layer. The issue is they're on black, and for the screen printer we want just the whites because the black is going to be the t-shirt. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select white, select similar, make a new layer, and when I hit Command Delete, it's going to put that right on that new layer like that for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with this. And I'm going to make the new layer, Command Delete. So now I've got that and that. And we'll bring in the background color, which will be our shirt color. And we can get rid of the two working layers. We don't need them anymore. Okay, so now we have this is one layer and this is one layer, which is perfect because those will be our two screens for screen printing. I'm going to go ahead and bring this red back in because I obviously want that red to be this, I want this to be that color red. So what I want to do is I'm going to double click on this, I'm going to go to color overlay, and I'm going to change it to that color red. And then I can now get rid of that red because we don't need it anymore. And then here's our finished product. We have that red as one screen, we have this white as one screen, and we have our shirt as our background layer. So what I'm typically going to do from this point on is send this, I'm going to mock it up on a t-shirt, which we can do really quick, and then I'm going to send that off to a band. I'm going to get it approved or obviously rejected as well. Either or can happen. But going to send it off to them as a t-shirt mock, and then from there, if they approve it, we're going to send them that layered file, and then they can send that off to their printer, and their printer will make it into two screens and print it on a shirt. So here it is mocked up on a shirt essentially. And keep in mind, if this is going in Hot Topic or something, it's just gonna be it's going to be displayed so you see this 16 by 20 design on the front. And you know, this is, yeah, that's pretty much going to be your finalized shirt design right there. And I would maybe even mock like 2 colorways up for the band and say like, hey, now because it's color separated, let's say, hey, for whatever reason they want green and they want like a kind of complementing blue color. And they want that on a white shirt. And then I could go ahead and I could mock this up as well and send this over to the band and say, boom, there you go. There's another shirt for you guys to sell. You know, so that's that sort of thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the entire process from Illustrator on over to Photoshop of how we would make a shirt start to finish. Yeah, I don't know. Are there any specific questions about anything in that process that was just really throwing people off that they didn't quite get what I was doing? Do I use color books? Yeah. I yes and no. It just depends on like who the client is. Some have set colors they want me to use, like this. Some they don't. So you send it off to the printer and just say match the closest color. Um, yeah, because I mean I'm not involved very much in the printing process when I design for bands. I pretty much just make the design, send it off a lot. Sometimes I don't even color separate it. If it's not specifically requested that I send them a layered Photoshop document, I will just send it off as is and then let the printer worry about layering it. Yeah. So yeah, that was cool. I think we got a cool little design out of that. So pretty happy with it. We'll post this one in a little bit later tonight. But other than that, yeah, it was a good time, and thanks to everyone for coming out and watching. And we'll do it again next Friday, same place, same time. So